Laurel.
Hey, Jessa.
Who's our guest today?
We have Rachel Alexandria. Woo, thanks for joining us. And welcome back. Our listeners and audience may recall that we interviewed Rachel very recently. And Jessa, just quickly, how were we connected with Rachel?
We met Rachel through Hera Hub, our co-working space. And and a few weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I think we hosted on Orion to talk about her business. I'm gonna say it's coaching for guiding highly sensitive souls.
Yeah, high performers with sensitive souls.
I'm sorry, I'm on this, but if I don't get it right once, I will. It's like directions. If I get lost once, I never get it right. So thank you for repeating yourself. And yeah, we were getting into it. We were talking about the Enneagram, and Laurel and I got very excited. Laurel especially so, and immediately was like, let's do an Enneagram reading. But we're like, okay, well, why don't you come back in a few weeks? And Rachel graciously said yes. So thank you.
Here I am. Yeah, you're welcome.
And so can you explain? So Laurel and I, this is our jam. We love Enneagram. And I was talking to some people actually earlier today, very excited that you were coming to do this. And they're like, wait, what? So for those wait whats, can you explain Enneagram?
Wait, what? Sure. So the Enneagram of personality is a pretty ancient system that it's originating around a piece of sacred geometry. So it's going to sound really wooey, but it's a personality typing system. We like to say the Enneagram doesn't put you in a box. It shows you the box you already live in. So it describes to us the 9 different types and really 27 different subtypes that really tell us about our inner motivations and our energy. So when you learn your Enneagram type, you're really being welcomed into a mystery school that shows you the path of, basically, as Joseph Campbell says, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. So the Enneagram type shows you your cave, but it also shows you your treasure. That was good. Ooh. We should write that one down.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. That's deep. So my understanding of it is that when you find out your Enneagram type, you can start to recognize areas of growth that you're growing and also areas of stress.
Absolutely. It really describes to you what is motivating you at such a deep level. And our motivations can be good and they can be bad, right? Some people teach it with the concept of like your type's original sin, which isn't to say what you do wrong, but more what is a deep sort of intrinsic driving force that you always have to counterbalance. You always need to be aware of. Mine, for example, is lust, which is about control, not just sex. So the Enneagram 8's type lusts for control. It's all about control. And no matter how healthy I become or what kind of personal work I do, it's always going to be in there as a thing that I have to look down at my hand and realize that I'm clenching. I watch videos of me dancing and one of my arms is always kind of hooked up and I'm like, let it go, Rachel. You can see behind me, you can't probably read it, but it says, let it go. There's a little...
I love the original sin comparison for Enneagrams because Laurel and I both done ours online, but we want to. So when you do it, or at least I'll share my experience. When I did it online, it's the Enneagram Institute, right?
That's one of them.
Okay, so that's the one I did, and when you read through the personality descriptors, it's like, okay, this is you, this is what drives you, this is where you might have conflict, and I read mine and I'm like, yes, that's 100% me. And it's like, you might also be this one. And I read that, I'm like, yes, that's 100% me. Right.
They can't all be me.
And then it said it had the original sin tied to the one that I think I am. And I'm like, that's 100% me. That's it. So, it's interesting because it's like the ones that are, positive, it was like, yeah, like we all kind of want to think we're that way. But then I think that when it's tied to that original sin that, I don't know, lies beneath, I was like, ooh, that's like what I have to watch for. But I don't want to say it because Rachel's going to do this reading, so I don't want to spoil it.
I don't have any suspicions, sort of. And I was just going to show folks for whoever hasn't seen it yet. I always like to draw the Enneagram whenever I am teaching it. So this is what the piece of geometry looks like.
Yeah.
Not with the numbers, but that's the numbers. Just there you go. You can see.
And
it.
if you're
Awesome.
listening,
whose book is that? Is that Sarah Jane's? No, Beatrice. We already talked about that. Right.
So if people are listening, it's a circle with a 1 at, I don't know, the 12th position on a clock, basically.
The 9 is at the 12th position.
Tomato. Just kidding. No. 9 is at the 12th position on the clock. And then the 1 looks like it's around the 1 and it circles around. And then within the circle, there are lines that connect the numbers to each other. So there's like kind of, I guess, complementary and contrasting.
They're connecting points. So every type has 2 main connecting points and also a wing or maybe 2 wings. So the Enneagram, the circle, as they say, describes the wholeness. It's like the holon, HOLON. And it indicates that we all belong, that we all have a place in the circle, and that we're not complete without everyone. And then there's a primary triangle inside the circle, and then there's what we call the hexagon, or the hexad. Hexad, it's not a hexagon, which is this other thing that connects, there's 3 points connected by the triangle, and then there's 6 other points connected by this other hexad symbol. So the connecting points that basically demonstrate that just the ways that we are interconnected. And, if you really do your Enneagram work, eventually you can kind of see and feel how you pick up pieces, or you have pieces within you of all the 9 types. Interesting.
Yeah. It's funny because after I did mine and I started reading about it, I have no business, quote, typing people, but it doesn't stop me from doing that, where I'm like, oh, I think this is what they're like. And then I kind of think about, okay, this is what drives them. And same, like Laurel and I are really big into the DISC profile. We love this stuff because I think it helps, we like doing this because it helps with our self-awareness. And then when we learn more about ourselves and our self-awareness, it helps us communicate with others and relate to others better, be more empathetic. So that's why we do it. But anyway, like you're talking about all this and the interconnectedness, I'm like, it helps me empathize with people a little bit more when I'm, maybe a little frustrated.
Which never happens, right?
No, I'm very patient. I keep forgetting. Happy birthday, Laurel. Today's Laurel's birthday.
Hey, happy birthday.
This is a cute little birthday in the back.
Yeah, this Enneagram with you, Rachel, is a lovely birthday gift. I want to honor you and thank you for showing up today and walking us through this. I support Jessa in all the things she gets excited about. And she introduced me to Enneagram, and I took the test really quickly and didn't think much of it, and it keeps popping up. And I think the universe is telling me to explore it a little more, and especially the more popular culture reference was when I listened to the Tim Ferriss podcast, when he talks about one of his darkest childhood memories. He shared it for the first time a couple months ago, and it was a big moment for him. And he tries to be very impeccable with his word, and so he's never bombastic like I am, where I embellish everything and get really excited. And he, in explaining his childhood trauma and his personality and his changes, he references Enneagram as being one of a crucial tool or modality in self-exploration and self-awareness. And he really thinks all other personality. I'm not going to speak for him. Everybody go listen to the Tim Ferriss podcast. But it resonated with me because he is an avid studier, and he will only recommend things that he feels that he has really studied and really researched, whereas I like everything. And so when he said, oh, I, follow this, believe in it, use it as a tool, I thought, all right, let's explore this a little bit deeper. We interviewed you, and here we are on my birthday. I'm really excited for you to walk us through this, and like, we'll just be vulnerable and see where it goes.
Awesome. Happy 29th birthday.
A few times over. Thank you.
Cool. Well, yeah.
Yeah, what do we do? How does this work?
Okay, so you want me to take it away? Okay.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So I'll
This is
just
your show to run, Rachel.
Ooh, let's take over the world.
Get that control.
It's a dangerous thing, man. Well, so first let me say that I appreciate what you named, Jessa, that it's not a great idea for people to go around trying to type each other. Like, the curiosity is wonderful. And I think I would encourage everyone to be curious and to like try on ideas with each other, with yourself and with each other. And at the same time, we don't ever want to be certain for someone else's type. I as I type anybody or I help anybody towards their type, I cannot be certain because that's not really possible. And over the years of me studying this and applying it, I have been wrong. Absolutely. At times where I thought I was really confident about somebody's type, and then I got to know them even better and was like, and they'd say, this just doesn't quite fit for me. And I'd sit back and re-examine and go, oh, what about this? And then we talk about it, and it turns out there's something else. So I'm just putting that caveat on. I've been studying this and practicing with it for, I'm guessing, close to 15 years now. So, that's with some pretty intense apprenticeship with a teacher, and then using it, teaching, learning from everybody I teach. I think of it as like an ongoing database of how types can appear in my head and in my heart. And I'm always adding to that database and kind of recollating and realigning. So, we'll see what we come up with today. And it's not going to be a certainty. It's just going to be a likelihood. Even if I personally, like, from my little ego, I'm like, I'm sure. My larger self is like, and I could be wrong.
Thank you. That's a great disclaimer. So thank you for saying that, because I think people like me, it's very easy to be like, I'm a dilettante. I'm not going to hide it. But so there is a lot, like you said, they're like studying for so long. There's so many levels, and I think it's really important too for us. I don't know the Enneagram, but I think if we as humans get too much, or like, oh, I'm in this type, then you think like, this is what I'm going to be like, or it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess, where if you like read about it. So it's just, again, just awareness of that.
Yeah, I agree. And I've seen people who studied the Enneagram for a long time who walk around, I believe, mistyped. And I'm in groups of teachers, and some people will agree and they'll be like, yeah, none of us see this person as a whatever. And people can, the Enneagram, the larger Enneagram community of teachers and people who know it well kind of allow for that. They just say, if somebody needs to spend a few years living at this other type and believing this is their type and they get something out of it, then great. Again, my ego feels frustrated by that and is like, no, but because I want things to be accurate.
Cool. I was thinking too, kind of what Laurel said reminded me when she was talking about it in pop culture. What I'd heard of Enneagram years ago, sorry, thinking about that, but my friend, my very, very good friend Tiana introduced me to it, and I did it. I took a little test. I'm like, okay, it's, whatever, and I moved on. And then I read about it recently in Chelsea Handler's book about a year or two ago, and I'm gonna I don't remember the name, but she was going through like really intense therapy, and her psychiatrist was like, have you heard of the Enneagram? And she talked about it and referenced it a lot. And I think she was an 8, if I remember correctly. And so reading about it was really energizing in how it helped her to kind of uncover some of her, like the reason her behaviors were the way they were or are the way they are. And the more I read the book, I'm like really into this. I followed like 30 Enneagram accounts on Instagram and went and immediately took the test. And I'm like, Laurel, you got to immediately take the test. So it has a power. It's one of those things you learn about it, and it's like very interesting, and it makes you want to deep dive more, because I think it is a really helpful tool. And obviously it motivates a lot of people, and then you talk about it like we're doing now, and then just kind of takes it in its own way.
Yeah, the Enneagram, I think, takes best root when you really, I always say it needs, what's the word? I've completely lost my words today. Not an indoctrination, but like, not an invocation. It's another word that sounds like that, but like a transmission, basically. That's my belief, that to really understand the Enneagram, it's really hard to get from just books, you know. And I mean, books are a great way to like get excited about it, get interested in it, but to really start to understand what it's about, you need a transmission from a teacher. That's
What about
how it was.
Instagram post?
Totally Instagram can substitute for an energy transmission. Absolutely. It's how I got it. You know, it moves it from a place of an intellectual, dabbling into being able to feel the vibrations, I think. So let me talk a little bit about the types, just as a quick rundown. I'm going to try and be quick. It's hard to be quick at this, because there's 9 types, and I don't. Let me just say that as I go over them, I am speaking to the average of the type, because there are levels of health, and types can appear very different on the surface depending on how healthy someone is, what kind of personal work they've done, what their family of origin is like, what their culture of origin is like. All of that affects how type appears on the surface. So we start with the void, which is type 9. Type 9s often, like I use the example of Keanu Reeves, the energy of Keanu, where he's both there and not there. You know, he's consequential, and yet at the same time, it's almost like he can disappear energetically. If you think about looking at his face, you almost can my teacher said, you can almost kind of see past them. So there's something about type 9 energy that's very etheric. It's diffuse. So type 9 personalities tend to be like go with the flow. They don't necessarily like change their minds easily or agree with people easily, but they won't stand in opposition much. They're often called the peacemaker, which is not something they necessarily do overtly, but more by the energy that they carry. So there's a lot of type 9s in the world, and we need them to kind of like, ease out the chemistry of the rest of us. Like they kind of take the temperature down. So we move from that kind of feeling of the void into like very strong structure. So think of it like coming out of the womb, but into existence. And that's type 1. Like it's a very, very structured vibration. It's, yes, no, right, wrong, binary. And the type 1 personality can feel like I often refer to Emma Thompson. I'm going to say, by the way, I don't know for sure any of these people's types because they haven't told me. So it's just to me what those public representations of those people feel like. So Emma Thompson to me feels like a type 1. If you think about her in something like Sense and Sensibility, her character is very rules focused. I cannot tell the man that I love him, and I can't, and I can't tell him, I can't confess to him because he's already engaged and it goes against the rules of society. So even though it breaks my heart, I will adhere to the rules of society. So type ones feel, kind of at the core, no matter how kind they are. And actually, ones can be very kind, very loving people. I know some amazing type ones. They also can have a sharpness to them because this focus on the rules and on what's appropriate is so strong in their awareness. So we move from that structured place into like more of a relational state. So if we've come from, this is just a metaphor to help people understand the Enneagram, come from the womb into existence and structure, and then you come into relationship, and that's type 2. So type 2 is very invested in other people. They're really interested in the give and take between people, and the positive emotional connection of being in connection. So type 2s often feel like I often know type 2s by their eyes. A lot of Enneagram types I'll kind of know by their eyes. Like they tend to have big eyes, or the way that they use their eyes, it's like very engaged. Like it feels very grade school teacher, that energy to me. Like it's really like, and how are you? Oh, that's so nice. Wow. And I'm not trying to in any way bag on 2s. Love 2s also. I love all the Enneagram types. It's just that their way of engaging with people is very invested, and you can really feel it. And it can feel, depending on your Enneagram type, it can feel very genuine, or it can feel invasive. You might love it. They're great friends because they put a lot of energy into being good at that. So then from this place of relational focus, we move into kind of an achievement focus. So thinking, okay, the child has been born, and then they're like, oh, I have friends, or I have a relationship with my mom or my dad. Now it's like, oh, I'm off to school, and it starts to matter what I do in the world. And so type 3 is this achievement energy. It's very focused on what can get done and how fast it can get done and how well. They care about well, but I think type 3s at the average care more about whether people see them getting it done than whether it is done. So there is a performance aspect to the type 3, and all of these types have challenges. I haven't been going over all of them, but the type 3's challenge is to get presence to their own inner motivations and not be so focused on, shining and getting the gold star all the time. So an example of a type 3 energy, which feels to me like very hummingbird, like they're very busy. Their energy is very busy. Katie Couric is an example. Tom Cruise is an example. There's just like very powerful, very successful people, but you can feel like it's a high vibe. You're like, whoa. A lot of people say Oprah is a type 3 also. So if she is, she'd be an example of like a more integrated 3, because there's like a peaceful energy that comes with her in addition. Like she's going and she's doing a lot of stuff, but she can also kind of be and sit and have that flowiness with her. So we move from 3 into 4. So from the achievement space kind of into the deeper emotional space, you think, okay, the kid's gone from being in school to kind of into the teenage years, like the emo years. So 4s are very aware of their emotions. Like they're very, it's like being in an ocean where there's lots of waves. That's what that energy feels like. It's a lot going on. And the 4's challenge is to not always see their feelings as facts, but to just see it as information and about something that influences them, but not invest wholeheartedly all the time into that ongoing sea of emotion. But they also are, some studies call them the deep sea diver. Like when you're in that deep ocean, you can bring amazing treasures out of the depths. So a lot of fours are artists. They're often called the artist on the Enneagram, or the unique one. Uniqueness matters a lot to fours. So we move from this artistry space, this like uniqueness focus, emotion focus, into like the intellect. Think about this kid's now going to college, and that's type 5, the intellectual, the observer. The energy can feel, a little like an exaggerated energy would be Spock on Star Trek. Like there's a very like focus on logic and understanding and on how things connect intellectually. It's really important to them to be understood, and but they're not usually the loudest people on the Enneagram. They tend to be more quiet observers overall. So, if you really want to understand what's going on in a system, find the 5 in a room who's been like sitting in the back watching, and ask them what's going on. And they're going to be like, well, this and this and this and this. Or they might be like, I wasn't paying any attention. I was thinking about the bonds of this chemical and how it relates to, So you move from this intellectual observer space into kind of what do you do with your life after this progression? And that's where we find type 6 in this place of what we call the dweller on the threshold. Type 6 is always like, I could leap, but should I? Wait, what do you guys think? How do I know it's safe? That's that energy. And so type 6s are often called the leader among men, or they're called the loyalist often, and I find that to be kind of deceptive when you're first starting on the Enneagram, because a lot of 6s don't necessarily feel like they're loyal, like that's not their most defining characteristic. But once they have decided to create a bond with somebody, and that person has made it past all the layers of security, they are fiercely loyal. It's true. Although once you're dead to them, you're dead to them. So there's a very strong likability vibe about type 6s on average. Like Tom Hanks is a really good example of type 6 energy. He's not the most suave or handsome man, but you just, but neither is he like extremely unique and artistic. You just like the guy. He's an everyman, and that's what 6 feels like. Meg Ryan is another example. And I'm aware, by the way, that as I'm saying this, a lot of the examples I use are white people. I'm not as well versed, and sometimes the audience isn't as familiar with other representations. And I really should just have a list of people I write down. Actually, I think I do somewhere, so I can remember. But I've been teaching this for so long, and so I'm just naming it. I'm aware that a lot of these are white people, and I apologize for that. So this likability vibe, a lot of people think that they are type 6's friends, but they might not actually be inside the walls of the type 6. And inside the walls of the type 6, who are very competent and are great team members, like they will perform and get things done along with your type 1s. They're like, we're on it, But there's also a lot of indecision and a lot of like cyclical thinking, going through all the things that could possibly happen and coming back to the center again, and then being like, oh, I still haven't made a decision, but here, let me go again around this round. So type 6's challenge is to learn to find and trust the intuition within that is beyond this mental hamster wheel, basically. And to be able to trust in a world that is ultimately not guaranteed to be safe. So moving from this dwelling on the threshold, then you leap. You're like, what do I do with my life? I don't know. And then the type 7 is like, let me see. And they just leap off the cliff. So the type 7 is the explorer, the adventurer, the bon vivant. They are very gregarious, and even though a number of them are introverts, by gregarious I don't mean they're always extroverts, but they are very lively. They tend to be people who you like to have come to the party. They also tend to be people that get taken less seriously or scapegoated because that kind of fun, bubbly energy doesn't show that beneath that, sevens are extremely thoughtful. They have a strong intellect and they put a lot of thought into things, but their presentation seems like, I don't know, we have a thing in this culture where we don't take the vivacious person seriously. So it's a thing that sevens struggle with, is to be taken as seriously as they are inside. So Liz Gilbert is a really good example, I feel, of a type 7 energy. If you read her books, she's incredibly intellectual. She thinks about many things. She makes amazing connections. She's a very deep person, and yet a lot of people dismiss her as like, oh, you got paid to go travel around the world and find love. Like, aren't you lucky? Ha, stupid, blonde white lady. But she's really actually brilliant. So that's an example of how that type 7 energy works. And the challenge for sevens is to basically keep recentering and not following the 800 flights of fancy and interest points that come to them all the time. So like coming back to center. And I haven't got into how all these types interconnect. Sevens connect to 1, so that structure can be helpful to them, and they connect to 5. Anyway, so moving from this leap off, like, yay, freedom, I'm just going to try stuff, I'm going to take a gap year, then coming into like just adult life, adult maturity, that's type 8, the energy of type 8. Obviously, everyone of all the types grows up and goes through all these stages. I'm just using this as a metaphor. So the type 8 energy is, okay, I've done all these things, and now I'm holding all these capabilities and, can feel seduced by the idea that I'm the one who holds up the world when I'm not. But as they say, with great power comes great responsibility. So type 8 energy can feel very heavy, very dense, immovable at times. I'll think of James Gandolfini as in The Sopranos, Tony Soprano, but also think of Queen Latifah. So there's a solidity at 8 that is hard to move and can be very intimidating for people. But one of the secrets is that 8s have the most tender heart in the whole Enneagram. It's just behind a lot of fortress. So a lot of people miss it, and 8s themselves can miss it. So the challenge at type 8 is to get a sense of mastery over ourselves, over the anger and the control, which is interesting. Like, how do you control? You don't. But how do you master dealing with having a lot of control capabilities and issues? And then from this place of kind of feeling like you can control everything, you step back into the void, which is 9, where we started. So you release all of that and you float again in the ether. And this is how the Enneagram circles and spirals up. So
Thank you.
that is
Sorry, I'm just sitting here, Laurel and I just sitting here nodding. Yes, because we're just absorbing everything you're talking about, and that was very clear, and the flowing through the stages was very easy to understand and like follow along. So thank you for the patience.
absolutely. It's the way that I had to learn it, because I started learning the types, and people often will read stuff, and there's so much. I mean, thick books are written about the Enneagram, and you can spend 20 pages on a single type. Yeah, Laurel's showing. So, people can read a bunch of stuff and then be like, wait, which one is the 1 again? What is 4 again? So having something that puts it all into a system just for the sake of starting to remember what type is what was really helpful for me when I began.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
Whereas, if you're not able to get a reading, or, you're just skimming the surface of this and like, this is the first time you're hearing about it, is there a good resource to learn more about your type? Like I went online and I found the test I found earlier that I mentioned. So I don't know if there's one that's more
So I get asked this a lot, and let me just say, no type can tell you definitively no test can tell you definitively what type you are. It's impossible to test for deep motivation and energy. It's going to depend on how you define yourself, how aware of yourself you are, and your own blind spots. So tests can only point you in a few directions. That being said, I get asked this question a lot, so I made a page on my website to give people some resources, because I don't have any one test I recommend. They all are going to give you, in fact, when I teach the Enneagram, I tell my students, take at least 2, if not 3 tests and bring them back, and they'll have different results. That's what happens. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, which isn't to say they're not useful. They're just helping you think more. The way you find your type is feeling into the energy of the types and seeing what sings back to you as you. So they'll give you a place to start. So on my website, I believe it's rachelalexandria.com/find-my-type, probably, but I'll give it to you for the show notes later.
Yeah.
So this was my intro. We should start trying to assess. And I think I want to start with Laurel, if that's okay.
Birthday girl.
It's my party, and I'll Enneagram if I want to.
Yes, that's the title of this episode. Okay, so Laurel, we don't know each other very well at all. I met you last time in the last podcast we did together. So I know that you both mentioned at that time you thought you might be the same type, but then you weren't sure about that. And I would say I'd be surprised if you were the same type, just from reading your energy, the two of you. Are there any types that you're more drawn to? Because it's easier to do a rule out than for me to be like, that's just how we start. Hi, Kelly.
Yes. Oh, thanks everyone for the happy birthday wishes in our comment box. The short and sweet of it is 7 makes me feel like my truest self. I feel like a blend of a lot of them, but for 7, what resonated with me very, very recently is I'm in a position of authority and I'm not taken seriously because of my youth, my gender, probably a bunch of other things. And I can't assume what another person is thinking. But lately, it's taken some much wiser gentlemen to put their foot down and throw their weight around for me to be taken seriously in my roles, in my professional roles. Mm-hmm. Not with Jessa. Jessa and I, like, we're 2 peas in a pod. But I've got a lot of really amazing opportunities and energy that flow towards me, and everything's exciting, and I'm interested in all the things, and I love learning and exploring, and I just find so much energy, enthusiasm, and lust for life. I feel like leaping off the cliff and just exploring it all, and I just find everything to be an adventure. So when you described the 7, I immediately thought that was me, and I also feel a little 8-y because I can get real in it and real, I don't know if stubborn is the correct word for it, but I feel a little Gandolfini. A little bit. Like I got some control and I'm moving things around and they're going to be strategically my way. And if they're not my way, then I'm struggling with the control. And I
cross Laurel.
What happens if you cross Laurel?
Well, previously, I've been working on this a lot, but I was very quick to anger because I'm so confused why the other person is so confused. Like everything seems very, like I keep saying the word like a lot. It's driving me crazy, but I can see the end game and the vision. I can visualize it. And I know every single step it takes to get there because I'm a planner. This is what I'm good at. I'm very detailed. And if someone is not as quick as me or doesn't see it or doesn't put the pedal to the metal or really buy in and like jump on the bandwagon and be a cheerleader with me, I'm like really confused. And then if that confusion lasts for too long, I get angry and frustrated. I've been working a lot on that for probably the past 2-3 years on emotional intelligence and recognizing when the triggers are frustration and anger, and what is underlying that frustration and anger. Is it a sense of being not the same as the other person, of being separate from the other person when really we're the same spirit, like we're the same. Learning about compassion has really helped me kind of address my anger and my deep hurt and fear. And then sometimes I feel like a 9, because if I am aware of my feelings and I feel the feelings and I process them, I'm able to go poof and just live in the void and kind of vanish out and be like, everything is wonderful and all is well and everything's happening as it should be, and I'm just accepting and loving and feeling great. I think the short and long of it is I feel all the things all at the same time.
Well, you feel 3 of the types.
3 of the
that's
types.
interesting. So, okay, so let's start with a rule out in those 3 types and see what sticks. How do you feel about boredom? Do you get bored?
Yes. And when I get bored, I used to fill it with alcohol, food, and performance at work.
Mm-hmm.
Just perform.
How do you feel when you get bored?
Less than. Not enough. I should be stimulated at all times.
I should be stimulated.
I should be giving and producing at all times.
How do you feel about sadness?
Guilty when it happens, because I am a white woman of privilege and have everything in my corner and life should be easy. So what am I sad about?
Do you ever give time for your sadness, or does it feel painful?
Both. Working on giving time for my sadness and feeling those feelings instead of shoving it down, ignoring it, saying it's not good enough, and distracting myself with alcohol, food, and work.
Okay. How about vulnerability?
Love
How
it.
is that?
Love it. I'll tell you anything you want to know. I will share. I have an open book. I won't hold anything back. I love you.
I love you too.
Whatever you want, I'll give it to you.
Interesting. Okay. So, to me, you don't read as a 9 because, like I said, the 9s are ether. They're not, I don't know any 9s who are very loquacious, like really jumping in and wanting to share a bunch of stuff immediately. Usually they need to be invited or provoked. So 9 is like low on my scale when I'm looking at it. 7 and 8 are, I don't have a strong sense yet, because you could be a 7 with an 8 wing or an 8 with a 7 wing. So, yeah, I mean, 8s typically don't enjoy vulnerability at all. So I'm kind of an exception. It's never bothered me. It's actually been something where I'm like, come closer, all the people. I'm a very 2-ish 8. So if you look at the image, you can see 8 connects to 2. So, that's something that influences me a lot. So that's what's tricky too, is where we've pulled a lot of our energy from as we grow up. So you're like, oh, I love vulnerability. Okay. But, the confusion and anger is interesting to me. It really could go either way. So let me see. I
would say this, Rachel. I'm in a huge transformative period in my life for the past 3 years, and it accelerates every year, where I'm hyper focused on self-actualization and healing and kind of walking myself home. And so some of what I'm conveying to you could be things that are changing. I'm not quick to anger anymore. I'm not really scared of really anything, but I'll have those moments.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be very consistent, like pretty predictable. I think
Do
getting
you
into
have
work
a?
with
Do you
Jessa
have
and
a?
everything has been good.
Oh, say that again. Sorry.
Getting into work with Jessa and being my own boss, and then also being like an executive leadership in another company, and being able to make decisions that affect change and see real impact and move forward with strategy makes me feel
Mm-hmm.
I go through life much easier.
So, is it important for you to feel capable?
Important for me to feel capable. I
Like capable, competent, the things you just said sounded like when you have a sense of efficacy in the world, you're doing a lot better.
Yes. I'm struggling to answer the question because I like to make change and help. I just like to help people. Ultimately, my ultimate value is I want people to live in harmony with themselves and each in the environment, with each other and with the environment. Like harmony is my main goal.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody doesn't see the harmonizing point and is not doing it fast enough, I get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking that. I was like, you want harmony, but it's like the way you want them to achieve harmony the way you suggest.
And
So it's kind of your way or the highway.
I don't feel
It's
that
your
way.
way or the wrong way.
Almost for me.
I'm just
I
teasing
mean,
you.
that's more 8 than it is 7. I'll tell you. When I rant about stuff to my roommate, she always teases me and says, "Man, if Rachel were in charge of the world, everything would be so much better." And I say, "Wouldn't it though?"
Wouldn't it? Don't you know? I mean, if you were to ask my husband, I'm sure he would chime in and be like, she likes it exactly how she wants it.
Well, it's like you were saying earlier, and you've said this like so many times to me, and I know I'm not supposed to type people, I'm just adding insight, is that when you say, I can see things, I can see the big picture, and I know how to get there, and if you just follow these steps and do it, things will be done. Like, why is it so hard? And being on the other end of that is something that I know, you and I talk like all the time. And so, there's been a few times when frustration comes up, and I know when frustration comes up, it's like I was very clear, why don't you get what I'm saying? Or I feel like you don't understand what I'm saying.
Do you
And
feel misunderstood a lot? Like, is that a trigger for you, Laurel?
Oh yeah, I would say the reactions that I receive from people are very confusing to me.
What does that mean? Confusing.
I don't understand it. And I used to go to a place. This is why I feel like this is very interesting, because now that I'm aware of my reactions, things are changing significantly and quickly. I've had patterns of behavior in which my reactions to people, a trigger for me, for example, would be a family member being like, Laurel, why are you so angry? What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? And I'm like, I'm not angry. I don't know where this is coming from. I'm not angry. Maybe I'm just intense and you don't like it. I'm very confused. And over time, I've realized that my reactions or responses to other people are usually something I don't like about myself. And I don't like the anger. I don't want to be a messy, angry person. I don't.
So
well, I
people
think that's when you
perceive
were under
you.
I think that's when like Laura was saying, she's done this like deep work the last like 3 years. And I think prior to that, like her like quote stress state was anger, or like quick to anger, because she was under a lot of stress and pressure, because like she said, she was not, she's kind of being wedged into places that weren't a good fit for her in situations. And so I think that was like whatever Enneagram type, like that was how she acted out of stress. And now, and even when I think about Laurel, and I like, unofficially try to type her, I'm like, it has changed so much, because I'm like, when I know her from this time, I'm like, she was under stress. And now as I know her today, it's totally different. So it's interesting, because I feel like I could observe how one could act under stress and how one could like act like in the growth state.
So, Laurel, do people find you intense? Is that a common thing people have said to you, like your family, people that have known you before?
My family would say I'm angry.
Okay.
My
You
friends,
said the word intensity.
my friends don't say I'm intense.
Okay. What about people in work situations?
I don't recall someone saying I'm intense.
Well, they won't necessarily say that. I guess I'm curious because you used the word intense, and that's a key word to me.
I have been described as passionate and thoughtful.
Uh-huh. And when they're describing you in less complimentary ways, what do people say?
Too much.
Okay.
Overshare, too much.
Dominating? Like taking up a lot of energy?
Yes.
Taking up a lot of space?
Yes.
Has that ever, just for contrast, Jessa, does anyone say that about you? That you're dominating, that you take up a lot of space?
No, I don't think so. Like, same thing. If they have, they've never said it to my face. I feel like the opposite. I'm probably like, if anything, I feel like if I'm stressed, I like shrink versus like dominate. But I'm a talker. I can definitely dominate a conversation.
But it's not, but energetically it feels different. And that's what I'm going to start to call out here. It's, words are complicated because when you try to use words to describe energy, people have their own connotations. So some people can experience sevens as dominating the conversation or taking the air out of the room if they really get into the negative aspects of the type 7 traits. It can seem narcissistic. It can like consume all the air in the room. But it's different than the feeling of dominance that 8s carry, which is kind of like bull in a china shop energy. It's like 8s don't understand that they walk around and they're like, I'm just walking, but meanwhile their tail swishes and it's just a tail swish and half a shelf of china gets knocked over.
I don't feel that way.
Which way?
I was more. Oh, I don't. My internet's just catching up with you. Sorry. I don't feel bull in a china shop. I would say I'm a highly sensitive person, highly empathetic, and like I'm watching people, not with judgment, but listening and learning from how they look and what they're wearing, what they smell like, and how I feel. And I'm like receiving so much.
But from the stress point of view,
no, it depends. If I haven't
that's on the inside. So what you just told me a minute ago, though, is the outside effect is that some people have perceived you as angry, too much. You know, they get their reactions to you have confused you. That would be the effect. So you can feel I'm like leaning toward you being an 8. Because some of the stuff you're describing in that confusion is like internally, remember what I said, 8s have the most tender heart of all the types behind the fortress.
Yeah.
So internally, like when people have gotten mad at me, I'm an 8. And when people have gotten mad at me, it's like, oh no, like I feel terrible, But I think outside, and so sometimes I've cried. I've had to do all this different work on like, I am not 100% responsible for other people's stuff, but in the past, so let me just tell you this brief story. When I was in grad school and I was just learning the Enneagram, we had our first year's self-assess because we were going to do like an assessment thing at the end of the first year. This is my therapy school. And so everyone sits down and like writes down a self-assessment form. Like it's all about personal work. What am I good at? What am I working on? What am I improving at? What do I need to work on? And then we actually have to ask our companions their thoughts. And I was like, well, I feel like I'm getting a lot of praise here, so I probably should work harder on figuring out what I need to work on. And I asked my peers, and then it was like this whole host of resentments opened up because I like opened the gates. I was like, hey, so, I mean, what do you think I should work on? And they're like, this time when you snubbed me 6 months ago and I asked you this and you shot me down and I was hurt forever. And I was like, oh, it was a bunch of that. And it was really traumatizing to me. And my Enneagram teacher talked to me through it and was like, you opened up your shields and they just took aim at your unprotected heart and shot. I'm not blaming those people. Like, we were all younger, whatever. It's not about that. But I think their experience probably was, this was not my experience, but I think it was their experience, that I came off as so competent and so defended that when there was finally an opening where I asked for feedback and I really seemed open, it was a time to bring up all these like grievances of things that I hadn't even noticed happened. That's the bull in the china shop effect. I don't think I'm stomping around trampling on people's dreams, but I do carry a lot of competency and a lot of clarity and a lot of decisiveness. And when I'm not open to something, I'm not open. Like, it's like shooting an arrow at a brick wall. Like, nothing's going to happen. And I don't even notice it, that they did it. So I see you nodding.
Yeah, I'm listening. Yes, I'm listening. And I would say I'm kind of like the group that you were in. It's like, oh, her defenses are down. I'm going to shoot an arrow and just like air my grievances and tell them all the things. Because I remember the way I felt a lot. Like, I remember moments very, very vividly. And I think I'm communicating it in a compassionate, loving way. Because I think, doesn't everybody want to improve? And I've learned lately, no. Unless someone asks you for your opinion, your guidance, your insight, and really wants to grow and learn, they're probably on their own healing journey and don't need your input or your guidance. Mm-hmm. Whereas before I've been doing this work, I was giving my guidance and my input and being kind of like a mirror to people I loved. And I didn't mean it. It was all coming from a very loving place. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. It's just like, if you lied, I'm going to say that you lied. And I remember exactly what happened. And I just remember.
So 8s tend to wield kind of a blunt instrument. We have a tendency to express things with blunt honesty. And you see me sometimes pausing to like recalibrate how I'm going to say things, because if I just said things straightforwardly all the time, it wouldn't land with enough people. But it's a recalibration I've learned to do. Like, my natural state is to be like, no, that's stupid. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
So that would be like, I'm not sure how much time we have if we gave it just an hour. So I wanted to pivot because we're kind of close to the end of an hour and I haven't spent much time with Jessa. I'll just note that I always am watching also how people respond to what I suggest for typing. And I would say 7s tend to be more suggestible. So if I'm saying to a 7, this isn't always true, but if I was saying to a 7, I wonder if you should consider 8, they might be like, oh, you think so? Like, really? Why? They would ask a bunch of questions. And 8s and 5s, maybe 1s, there's certain types that have more of a masculine energy that are more like, well, I don't know about that. Why? Like there's a bit more of a, And I feel a little bit more of that as I'm talking with you. Like, I believe you are open. And then there's also this, prove it to me. I don't know if I believe that.
Yeah. Yep.
It's more 8 than it is 7. I'll say that. 7s don't push back in that challenging kind of way. That's another word for the 8 is the challenger. Oh,
I had a presentation at the University of San Diego. My title was The Challenger.
So I'd be curious. I heard you say you don't love the anger. I'd be curious for you to look more into 8 and to ask yourself the honest question, why might I not want to be this type? Because sometimes if we're challenged to find our type, I say, look at the one you least want to be. And that might be the one that you are.
For sure.
Because it's showing you the shit you don't like and you want to avoid about yourself.
100%. Yes. You've convinced me. Wall down.
Eights are also very decisive. So when the gut says yes, they're just like, okay, fine, move on. We don't need to keep talking about this.
I want to give Jessa the time too.
That's Laurel though, for sure. I feel like when she decides and then she does it, which is great. Because like, we'll get into this, but I'm not like that. So Laurel acts very quickly in a good way.
So as I was going through the types, and I know, Jessa, you have a pretty strong feeling about what your type might be. As I went through the types, did anything change for you? Like, what came up for you?
No, I think you just reinforced what I already thought. I mean, same thing. You go through them all, and I'm like, well, I could be this, it could be this. Should I just say it?
Sure.
So I think I'm a 7, and especially as I'm like listening to you ask all these questions, I have my own answers. And I feel like a little bit of 9, only because I don't like confrontation. So it's like the peacemaker, but I'm not that. I know that. And then
7s don't like confrontation either.
Okay, well, there you go. And I feel like a little bit of 2, but I know that's not me either. But I just like have a little 2 vibes. But I'm not, like when I'm talking to someone, I'm not engaged. I'm usually like, I'm trying to be like, okay, listen to this person, pay attention. No, sorry. This is a terrible thing.
You just reminded me of a friend of mine who's a 7, who I know she's kind of doing that. She's like, I care about you and I want to be connected and I like you and I want to be liked, but also it's hard for me to focus.
Yeah. So that's why I feel like I feel more of a 7, even though I kind of see some of the other things. Yeah, I'm very simple.
So 7s and 2s can look alike. There's lookalikes for any 2 Enneagram types. You can make an argument of like, well, am I a 6 or am I an 8? Well, here's how they look alike. 7s and 2s can look alike because there is a relational focus, but 7s are more concerned with being liked. Like they're more scared of not being liked. Like that's a legit fear in 7s. And when if they need to say no to things, which they really don't like to do, the fear is they won't like me if I don't say yes to them. Yeah. Whereas 2s are like, am I building enough relationship currency with this person? But 2s,
I think I'm 100% a 7 with that, because 2s, I definitely feel that where I'm like, okay, the currency vibe. But when you said that this was like a year ago, I was with my acupuncturist talking about something about that, about saying no. And she was like, oh, that's so sad. You think if you say no to something, people won't like you? I'm like, well, when you put it like that does sound really sad, but yeah, I guess that's what it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one of the challenges for 7. That's like, remember I said 7s have to learn to ground and center. And some of that is saying no to stuff. And I've known so many 7s who say yes to all the things, but they're actually exhausted.
Yes.
Like burnout for 7s is a real concern because you guys have a lot to give and a lot of energy and a lot of interest, but there can be this like, how many times do I have to put on my suit and dance for the people kind of feeling?
It's funny when you say that, because when Laurel and I met, I was 100% going through burnout, and that's when she was like going through her like stressful period too. And so I feel like we were both like at our opposite ends. And I tell everybody, I don't think, it's hard for people to relate. Well, I shouldn't say. I think it sounds weird for me to say, but for me, the pandemic like forced me to slow down and say no and just be like, oh, and like, what do I want to do? What is going on? And so I needed that. No weird. I'm glad it can be over. I'm over it. Maybe just a month, but
yeah. No, I hear you. I see this in 7s all the time, and I have clients who are 7s. It's funny because most of my clients are 7s and 8s. Like this is who I do a lot of work with. Well, because you're high performers with sensitive souls a lot of the time. So, but also because I love 7s. I love working and playing with 7s. They're very complimentary for me. My Enneagram teacher was a 7. And 8s because I feel like I serve 8s really well because I am one. And so I can speak to the deep secrets of 8 more than I think most people can. 8s are one of the more misunderstood types on the Enneagram. And we carry this like fear of being misunderstood too. Like all the time I'm like, I don't care if you disagree with me, if you actually understand what I'm saying.
Yes,
But
true.
you don't, right? You don't actually understand what I'm saying. And it drives me crazy. Like if you're disagreeing with me, but you didn't get it, that's like, ah! So
I think that's why Laurel and I are business partners, because we're 7 and 8s and they're like connecting over that.
I find there's lots of complementary pairings, but I do find, this is just my own little theory, that people tend to gravitate towards those around the same area of the Enneagram that they are. So, when I meet somebody who's like a 1 or a 3, they tend to have a lot of friends who are like 2s and 3s and maybe some 1s. I'm over here on 8. A lot of my friends are 7s. I've had a couple 6s, 5s, 9s, and I have fewer over here. So
I like yes people. Laurel's like, I'm like, Laurel, I have this idea. Before like I've even like said it, she's like, yes. So whatever you want to do, let's do it. I trust you. Let's do it. I'm like, all right.
Even but like, you hear that.
She's like, Enneagram. Yeah, you're into it. I'm into it. Let's do it. I'm like, huh, this is so nice.
Right. And with 8s, trust is key. Trust, integrity.
Yes.
And if you have that, it's like my roommate said, oh, do you want to get more testimonials from this cleaner before we hire them? Somebody from Hair Hub. And I was like, no, I trust her. I just already have a vibe on her. I don't need to ask that just feels like a waste of my time to ask a bunch of other people if they liked her cleaning job. No, I already trust her. I'm good.
I trust Jessa. If she's passionate about something, interested, excited about something, I'm like, yeah, let's dig in and see where this goes. We're going to fly and it's going to be magic and wonderful things are going to open up and we're going to soar.
Yay!
And then with some other people, I'm like, no, you're a liar.
See, I have to dig into everything. I'm that person reading like, okay, Yelp reviews, but Yelp, are those filtered out? Let me check the Google reviews. I'm like, okay, well, I can't see the pictures. So let me go back and look at the pictures. Like, I have to look at everything.
So 7s, I didn't talk about this, but 7s and 4s are very into beauty and like aesthetics. And so, yeah, exactly. So 7s like, what's that?
That one must have slipped past me.
I don't think so, because look at the background that you're in and look at the background that Laurel's in. Like your background is curated.
Mine is self-indulgent.
Yeah. Yours is like me.
This is all about me today.
Yes. So, but sevens, it's that connection to 1. There's a little fastidiousness. There's a little perfectionism. There's a little polish and refinement and interest in aesthetics. But where they have a problem is in data. They are data and research hoarders. They will just accumulate and accumulate and accumulate, and it's like because they can't say
and not make decisions. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
If I say like, what happens? I don't want to commit to one thing because what if something else better comes up? But at the same time, yeah, I'm saying yes to everything that I don't really care about.
That is quintessential 7. I don't want to commit to something because it would kill
Very
the
basic.
possibilities. It would kill the future fantasy possibilities. So then I take on everything and then I'm overwhelmed by my not making a decision. 8s don't tend to have that problem.
Yeah.
We're not
That's
about...
me, it's the opposite. Laurel's like, yes, let's do it. And I'm like, no, wait, it's not, we're not ready. It's too soon. Let's do more research. And somewhere there's a balance where things can...
Yeah, because you bring like exciting ideas. Like you're never going to be missing ideas. And you bring like that magical verve, and she brings the decisiveness and the follow through and can see from the beginning to the end and look for all the obstacles if you're like the 8 that I am. Like as soon as someone brings me an idea, I'm like, and they'll be like, well, you don't like it? I'm like, no, I'm just already thinking, okay, here's these 3 things that need to get handled before we can say yes to that. And I need to know how I'm going to handle them. So she's bringing that. Yeah. And then you bring polish, right? Like you bring a little bit of polish to what happens, to the outcome. You're like, well, okay, but let's put a bow on it.
Yes, I totally think that's it. And we've just, I think recently kind of honed that process of like, okay, this is what you're really good at. This is what I'm good at. Let's, you do this and then I'll do that. And, maybe it works. And I think another thing too with Laurel is as you know, when you kind of talk about like our business partner relationship and complementary, traits is that she's very confident and she's not afraid. And so that is great for one, business development. If, we want to make money, I'm like, oh no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. You don't have to pay us. Like, we'll figure it out, whatever. And Laurel's like, wait, what? No, you have to pay us. And this is how much it costs. And, that's what we're doing. And then Laurel also is really good about just like going to the top. She's not afraid to talk to anybody. She's like, I'm at their level. We are peers. And I'm like, oh, this person's a CEO or president. Maybe I shouldn't, they don't want to talk to me because like, who am I? And Laurel's like, what? No, like, no, I'm just going to, she's like, I'm just going to pick up the phone. Their phone number's here. I'm just going to call them. And I'm like, no, wait, no, don't, Laurel, don't.
Eights have BDE.
Yes, yes.
I've got big BDE.
Mm-hmm.
We
just do.
We just do.
BDE.
And I do feel like with Jessa, we can do anything. I truly feel on the inside we can do anything that we want to.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do,
and it's a vibe. This is what tests can't show you, but I can feel it. It's a vibe. There's just a vibe of that BDE, and it carries eights through. Like, we are very competent, but confidence is a thing that will convince. Like, I have been led to do so many things that later on I'm like, that's a part of the privilege too. It's not just whiteness, because there's plenty of white friends I have who get screwed over by things. But my BDE, my 8 energy, like, I remember being in high school. I'm just like this little, like, young for my grade high schooler, and I'd be walking around the halls. You're supposed to carry a hall pass. And I didn't, like, I'd be like, oh, I have to go whatever. And I didn't get my hall pass, and no one would ever stop me. But they would stop other people. But it's because I look like I know what I'm doing, and I'm doing something important. And I carry that all the time. And it's not something I'm doing on purpose.
That's what we learned in improv. They basically taught us, like, if you believe it, everyone else will believe it. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. Just, be like, yeah, like I heard a talking broom today and the broom said this. And like, as long as you keep talking, people are going to become convinced, like, oh, I guess the broom did talk to her. And this was never good at it. Cause I'm like, but did it talk? Or are you sure? Yeah, I always play the straight character in improv because
perception is reality. And if I perceive myself as competent and capable, I am competent and capable.
But it's a thing that comes naturally to eights that doesn't come naturally to other people. And that's a thing I've had to learn when, like, helping people through difficult communications, which is one of my specialties. I used to be like, try saying this. And over time learned it doesn't work because they don't carry the same energy I do. So we have to find what works for their energy. When I say, this is how it is, people fuck off. Like, they leave me alone.
Yeah.
But when other people say, this is how it is, like, it just doesn't.
I always could say that. Laurel would I would pick the fights and Laurel would fight them for me. I mean, Laurel, guess what happened? And she's like, oh, no, that's not going to fly.
Yeah. No one messes with Jessa. Like, what are you doing undermining Jessa? How do you not understand that she is a treasure and you are lucky to be with her? So
wait, first of all, thank you. My favorite story, I think you don't care if I share, but it was San Diego Startup Week. I always tell stories. About 2 years ago, the last one that was in person. And at Startup Week, there was an app. And on this app, you would get points. It was like for a conference. And so the app was tied to the conference and you get points for engaging on the app. Well, some users got on there and they were hacking the system and they would just type, hi, yes, okay, just one word. So they would get these points and move up on the leaderboard. And Laurel is competitive by nature. And she was on the leaderboard and she was engaging because we were just starting a Stellar Co. And we'd put together a panel for the event. Laurel was on it with a few other people, Dr. Bronner's and Tory Project, and it was awesome. Nathan Young moderated it. And so we were like, really wanted to promote it. And I was like, Laurel, I'm like, do you know that these people are gaming the system? And she was like, no. Next thing I knew, they were banned.
I got them banned.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm that competitive. I was like number 8, ironically, or 10 on the leaderboard was us. And the people in front of me were all these these people are trying to mess with it. And I'm like, no, this is messing with my vision.
And it's also unfair, right? It's also unethical.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, and I want to keep going, but we can't.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. I was like, I'm aware. So I would like to change this up just a teeny tiny bit, since this was kind of a fun one. Well, it was a fun one today, and it was a little different, with the reading, and we each give one key takeaway for our 3-point landing.
For sure. It's great.
Will you share that, Rachel?
You guys go first.
Okay. So I'm gonna do my key takeaway. And my key takeaway is to find your vibes. Like you're saying, like feel who you vibe with, because Laurel and I are 7 and 8, we're on one side. You might be a 1 or 2, 2 and 3, whatever, but don't feel good with whoever you're working with. Like you want to notice your energy, listen to it, and react to it accordingly in a healthy way.
Yeah. I'll add to if you're afraid of what you might be, go into it more and just embrace it, explore it, see what resonates and feels good for you. I feel like this tool, if you do more, for me personally, if I do more self-exploration, it might expand me instead of me like saying, no, I'm this particular way and blocking myself. I'll just get out of my own way and see what happens.
I love that.
I would. You
What's that?
You said you would, you ate her.
Challenger. Yeah.
Challenger. I'm surprised. At least I can convince you.
Yeah. I would say, I don't know that I shared this in here, but understanding the Enneagram helped me have so much more compassion for how other people are. When I really got that what is innately true in me that I can't fully change, my desire for control, my desire to challenge people, my need for competency and efficacy, my sustaining energy, that those are how I am, and other people just are these other ways. When I really understood these other types, I just got that it so much wasn't personal about how people are different when I don't like it. It's just like, oh, that's just who they are. It's not an excuse to be a jerkwad, right? But when people make choices based on their energy level, that's not about me, and that's a truth about who they are. So it helped me relax a lot.
And I would like to spend more time with you. You'll be hearing from me. Thank you.
Sweet.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thanks for coming back. That was really fun. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yay!